At exactly 3 a.m., the wooden box creaked open on its own. Thomas held his breath, his hands trembling as he peered inside. A new photo lay within, one that hadn't been there before. His heart pounded as he picked it up. It was a picture of his bedroom, of his bed, of him, sleeping. But something else was in the photo too. Something standing right behind him. The cursed wooden box. They say you should never take home something you found buried in the woods. But curiosity is a louder voice than reason, especially when it whispers your name. It began on a quiet October afternoon. The leaves were turning, wind whispered through the trees, and Thomas Hale had taken a long walk in the forest behind his newly inherited countryside home. The house had belonged to his late uncle, a recluse no one had seen for years before his sudden death. Thomas had never known the man well, but was surprised to be the sole inheritor of both the house and the property it stood on. That day, as he explored the dense, overgrown woods, something caught his eye. A patch of disturbed earth behind a cluster of thorn-covered oaks. There, half buried in moss and dirt, was a small wooden box, rectangular, about the size of a shoebox. It was dark and polished, with intricate carvings along its surface, symbols Thomas didn't recognize, curling and swirling like ancient script. He hesitated, then he dug it up with his hands. The box felt warm to the touch, as though it had been lying in sunlight, but the forest canopy was thick. No light had touched that spot for hours, maybe longer. There was no lock, no hinge, just a lid that slid off with a little effort. Inside, nothing, just black velvet lining, smooth, untouched, pristine. Thomas brought it home. That night, as the wind howled and branches tapped on the old window panes, the box sat on the mantel above the fireplace, silent and still. He couldn't explain why he didn't put it away. Something about it compelled him, drew him, like it belonged. He went to bed just after midnight, the box still on the mantel. At 3:06 a.m., Thomas awoke. He didn't know why. There was no sound, no light, just a feeling in his chest like he was being watched. The kind of cold, crawling sensation that creeps up your spine and whispers, "You're not alone." He went downstairs. The air was colder than it should have been, and the box was open. Inside was a photograph. Thomas blinked, picked it up with trembling fingers. It was old, yellowed at the edges, and the image was blurry, but he could still make it out. A man sitting on the porch of this very house, staring directly at the camera. The face was half obscured by shadow, but the clothes, the stance, it looked eerily like Uncle Raymond, he whispered. The man's eyes in the photo seemed to shimmer, almost glow. He shook his head and put the photo down, closed the box. He tried to sleep, but couldn't. The next morning, the box was closed again, like nothing had happened. But the photo was still there, resting quietly on the kitchen table where he'd left it. Thomas tried to ignore it, told himself it was just stress, moving into a new house, getting used to the country air. But when night fell again, he couldn't help watching the box. Midnight came. He waited. Nothing. Still silence. But at exactly 3:06 a soft click. He turned toward the fireplace. The box was open again. Inside, another photo. This one showed a figure standing at the edge of the forest, right where he had found the box. The figure's back was turned, but Thomas felt a cold jolt in his gut. It was him. Same jacket, same jeans, same muddy boots. Hadn't told anyone about finding the box. No one had taken a photo. He was alone, completely alone that day. So, who took the picture? Thomas locked the box in a drawer that night. The next day, he drove into town, asked about his uncle, about the house, about anything strange that might have happened. Most people just shook their heads, said old Raymond was a loner, a bit of a weirdo, spent too much time in the woods talking about preserving the old ways. But one elderly man at the local diner, a retired historian named Mr. Abner Clay, narrowed his eyes when Thomas mentioned the wooden box, a small box carved with symbols. He asked. Thomas nodded slowly. Abner leaned in, lowering his voice. That sounds like one of the old keepsake vessels, supposed to trap a soul or release one, depending on who opens it. Thomas laughed nervously. You mean like a cursed object? Abner didn't laugh. I mean exactly that. Thomas left the diner chilled and unsettled. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in the living room with a flashlight and a baseball bat, watching the drawer where he'd locked the box. 6 a.m. Click. The drawer opened by itself. The box sat there, lid off. A new photo. This one was of the living room, taken from inside the house, taken from the exact spot where Thomas now sat. And in the photo, someone stood behind him. A tall figure, shadowy, unsmiling. He spun around. No one, but the air behind him was cold, and something unseen seemed to drift past him, brushing his neck like a whisper. He didn't sleep again that night. The next day, the photos were gone. So was the box. But that night, the tapping began on the window. 3 taps, every night. At 3:06 a.m., Thomas hadn't slept in over 48 hours. His eyes were red, his hands trembling slightly as he poured himself a 3rd cup of coffee for the night. It didn't help much. Nothing did anymore. He stood by the window, staring at the darkness outside. The tapping had started again the night before. 3 gentle knocks at the glass at precisely 3:06 a.m. Always 3, always that same patient rhythm. He'd rushed to the window the first night it happened, pulled the curtains aside, flashlight in hand. No one, no footprints, just darkness and wind. Tonight, he was ready. The baseball bat sat beside him, flashlight fully charged. He'd placed motion-activated lights around the porch. If anything moved out there, he'd see it. The clock read 3:05. He held his breath. 6, tap, tap, tap. Thomas flinched. The light on the porch stayed off. Nothing moved. But the sound was unmistakable. 3 deliberate knocks on the window. He turned quickly, pulling back the curtain. Nothing. He stepped outside, barefoot, bat in hand. Cold dew soaked into his socks as he searched the yard. The forest loomed like a wall of black teeth in the distance, but there were no signs of life, just silence, until he turned around and saw the box. It was sitting on his porch, right in front of the door, as if it had walked there. He froze, heart thudding. It was the same wooden box, same carvings, but now it was wrapped with a faded red ribbon tied in a perfect bow. A note rested on top. He stepped closer, snatched the note and backed away quickly. The paper was yellowed, fragile, the handwriting shaky. "Stop looking. You've already opened the door." Thomas stared at it, skin crawling. The door to what? He picked up the box with trembling hands and brought it inside, setting it on the kitchen table. The ribbon slid off on its own as soon as he touched it. The lid creaked open. Inside, another photo. This one showed the front yard from above, like the camera had been in the air, hovering. Thomas stood in the photo, staring up, confusion on his face, just like he'd been minutes ago. His hands began to shake. This was impossible. No drones, no cameras. He lived alone. Who was taking these? He shoved the photo away and closed the box. Then he grabbed his car keys. It was time to leave. The engine sputtered, wouldn't start. He tried again. Nothing. He cursed, slammed the steering wheel. The dashboard flickered, then died completely. Phone. No service. Not even one bar. He was trapped. Back inside, he tried to call roadside assistance on the landline his uncle had left. The line was dead, static only. And then, just before he put the receiver down, he heard something. A voice, faint like a whisper between the static. "Let us in." Thomas dropped the phone. That night, the tapping came again. But this time, it wasn't at the window. It was at the front door. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. He held the bat tightly, creeping to the door. The peephole showed only blackness. He opened the door. No one. But there were footprints now. Bare, human footprints, wet and smeared with mud, leading from the woods to his porch, and then back again. He followed them with the flashlight, only to find they vanished halfway across the lawn. He returned inside to find the box had moved. It was now in the living room, placed on top of the coffee table. He hadn't touched it. It was open again. Another photo. This time, a close-up of his face, taken while he was sleeping. Mouth slightly open, eyes shut. A silhouette stood in the background of the photo, tall and skeletal. He dropped it and backed away. He needed help. He needed answers. The next day, Thomas drove into town in a rental car he'd arranged that morning from the only place with spotty cell service, an abandoned gas station hilltop 15 minutes away. He returned to the diner and found Abner Clay again. The old man looked up from his coffee, grimacing when he saw Thomas. "You brought it back, didn't you?" Thomas didn't even ask how he knew. Abner gestured for him to sit. "Some things want to be found. That box, it's not just cursed. It's a beacon. A beacon. Old legends say these boxes were used by a cult centuries ago. Not to trap souls, but to feed them. The more you look, the more you touch, the more you fear, the stronger it gets. That box is a gateway." Thomas leaned in. "A gateway to where?" Abner's voice dropped to a whisper. "To the ones who live between reflections. The ones who watch through glass." Thomas remembered the photos, the angles, the presence behind him. Mirrors, windows, cameras. "They're called the Hollowed," Abner said. "Once they mark you, they follow you through any reflection. The photos are their way in. How do I stop it? You can't. But you can delay them. You can bind the box again. Seal it. Bury it where no light touches." Thomas left the diner, mind spinning. He drove straight to a hardware store, buying chains, locks, even bricks. He was going to seal the box in concrete if he had to. That night he didn't hear knocking. No sound. No tapping. For the first time in days, peace. He locked the box in a small safe and placed the safe in the basement. Then he surrounded it with mirrors, all turned inward, based on Abner's warning that reflections could confuse the hollowed. He tried to sleep. He actually managed to close his eyes until he woke again at 3:06 a.m. Not to a knock, not to a voice, but to the sound of glass shattering. He ran downstairs, every mirror in the basement broken, the safe door open. The box was gone, but something had been left behind. A new photo. His bedroom, his bed, and himself sleeping from above. But in this one, his eyes were open, and he was smiling. The photo burned in Thomas's mind long after he tore it up. His own face, eyes open in sleep, grinning. But he didn't remember smiling. He didn't even remember waking. It felt like he had been watching himself, or worse, that someone else had worn his skin for a while. He didn't sleep the next night. Instead, he sat on the couch with all the lights on, every mirror in the house either covered or shattered. His house was now a graveyard of reflections, and he didn't care. He just wanted it to stop. But the hollowed didn't need mirrors anymore. 6 a.m. this time, the box didn't knock. It sang. A low, breathy hum floated from the basement, like the sound of wind passing through a throat. Thomas stood, goosebumps crawling across his skin. He grabbed his bat, flicked on the flashlight, and descended the basement stairs slowly. Each step creaked louder than the last. The light flickered. The humming grew louder. And there it was, the box, sitting dead center in the basement floor. But it wasn't alone. 7 mirrors now stood around it in a perfect circle, all facing outward. Thomas hadn't put them there. He had destroyed all his mirrors. These were new. Their surfaces shimmered like water, not glass. The reflections they showed weren't his basement. They showed a different room entirely. Stone walls, dripping ceilings, endless dark hallways twisting behind. Thomas stepped closer. He looked into one mirror and saw himself. But the version inside wasn't moving like him. It was standing still. And then, slowly, its hand raised and waved. Thomas ran. He drove to the edge of town, parked by the lake. The morning mist hadn't lifted yet, and fog clung low over the water like a shroud. He stared at the wooden box sitting in the passenger seat, still sealed with chains and tape, but vibrating faintly, whispering, calling. He took it out, placed it in an old burlap sack, and began walking into the woods behind the lake. He remembered what Abner said. Bury it where no light touches. There was a spot, an old cave from his childhood, deep in the woods, past where the trail ends. He remembered hiding there once during a thunderstorm. It had always felt wrong, even then. Now it seemed perfect. It took hours to find the cave. The mouth was narrow, hidden beneath a curtain of ivy and roots. The moment Thomas stepped inside, he felt the temperature drop. The box stopped whispering. Finally, he went deeper, flashlight in one hand, sack over his shoulder, breathing heavy. The air was thick with moisture and something else, rot. He found a spot near the far wall, pulled out a rusted camping shovel he had brought, and started digging. Each strike echoed endlessly through the cave. like someone else was digging too, just around the corner. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The hole was nearly 3 feet deep when he finally dropped the sack inside. He began to cover it quickly, heart racing. But then he heard it. A laugh, soft, wet, childlike. He spun around, flashlight beam, swinging wildly through the cave. Nothing. But then he noticed something in the dirt wall. Fingers, human fingers, gray, stiff, reaching from the stone like someone had been buried alive in the walls. And then one moved. Thomas screamed, dropped the flashlight, and ran. He didn't look back. He made it home by nightfall, collapsed on the porch, sweating and gasping. The box was gone, buried, done, or so he thought. When he opened his front door, it was waiting on the kitchen table. No chains, no sack, no dirt, just the box. And the lid was open. Inside, not a photo this time, a mirror shard, and carved into the wood beneath it, letters written in something dark and crusted. Not deep enough. Thomas began researching obsessively. Ancient burial rituals, demon lore, shadow cults, and he referenced boxes that summoned entities through reflections. He barely ate, barely spoke. The name, the Hollowed, appeared only once, in a forum that had been shut down for years. A cached page written in broken English and uploaded from somewhere in Eastern Europe. They are not demons. They are echoes, empty things. They were never alive, and they cannot die. They wear the faces of those they take. Once you see them, they remember you. Once you fear them, they follow. Once you invite them, they enter. At the bottom of the page, a list of known items used by the Hollowed. One of them was described as the Box of Sight, a cursed relic used to harvest reflections of the soul. Thomas slammed his laptop shut. It all made sense now. Every photo, every reflection, every time he looked, they took something. Memory, identity, pieces of him. That smile in the photo. It hadn't been his, but it had come from him. That night, the dreams returned. He found himself in a long, dark hallway made of mirrors. Each step forward made the walls stretch further away. He looked into the glass and saw himself, but older, grayer, empty. Then the lights flickered and the reflections changed. Now they showed everyone he knew, his parents, his ex-girlfriend, his co-workers, all smiling, but not normal smiles. Stretched, bloody, hollow, and behind each one, standing just in the corner of every mirrored frame, were tall, faceless figures. Watching, he woke up screaming. The box was beside him, and this time, he didn't touch it. He just stared, and it opened on its own. Inside, a mirror, a full one, framed in blackened wood. His reflection didn't move, and then it smiled. Thomas locked every door. He boarded up every window. He tore down every reflective surface in the house. TVs, picture frames, polished metal. Even the screen of his phone lay shattered on the floor. He didn't care. Mirrors were doorways, and something had already stepped through. But still, the box remained. No matter where he threw it, burned it, buried it, it came back, always waiting for him, always opening. Tonight, it sat on his bed like a gift from a sadistic god. The full-length mirror it had delivered in the night now stood in his hallway, tall and monolithic. He hadn't touched it, hadn't moved it, but it had somehow installed itself upright, anchored like it had always been there. He avoided it like death, because in the mirror, he no longer saw himself. That night, Thomas drove out of town, far out, through winding roads, past the hills, until the signal vanished and the trees grew denser. His destination, a forgotten name whispered online, in cursed forms and redacted files. St. Dimos Asylum, officially shut down in 1962. Unofficially, it never left the minds of those who claimed to escape it, a place for the reflected sick, a phrase Thomas now understood all too well. He found it at the end of an overgrown path, hidden behind vines and rusting fences. The building loomed like a corpse, windows broken, stone walls cracked, the scent of rot oozing from its doors. The box buzzed violently in the passenger seat, as if recognizing the place. He took it with him. Inside, the air was thick with mold and the remnants of madness. Ancient paperwork lay scattered, soaked in black water. A mural on one wall showed figures in white robes holding mirrors toward a burning sky. Their faces were scratched out. He moved deeper through the halls. Scratched words marked the walls. In what looked like nails or bone, the mirror sees what you forget. You can't kill what isn't alive. We are what you left behind. Thomas descended a winding stairwell. In the sub-basement, past sealed iron doors, he found it. The mirror room. 20 tall mirrors lined the walls in a perfect circle. Their surfaces blackened and pulsing slightly like lungs. In the center, a pit no wider than a manhole, no bottom in sight. The box vibrated violently now, emitting a low, warbling whine. He stepped into the room, and every mirror lit up, not with reflections, but memories. One showed his childhood bedroom, another, the day his mother died, another, his first kiss, another, the last fight with Claire before she left, and others, darker ones, nights he couldn't remember, moments of rage, things he never told anyone. And then, one mirror showed him, but not now, future him, or something like him, hair white, eyes black, a grin wider than his face. Behind him, dozens of hollow people watched with bleeding smiles. The figure reached through the glass. Thomas stumbled back, and the box opened. This time, there was no photo, just a slip of scorched paper. Trade complete. You are now hollow. Return to us, or remain empty. Thomas fell to his knees, trembling. I didn't trade anything, he whispered. I didn't agree to this, but something inside him knew that wasn't true. The first night when he opened the box, when he looked into that first photo, he had made a silent pact, not with words, but with attention, with fear, and that was all the Hollowed needed. He heard a voice behind him. Not human. You gave us your face. Now we wear it better. He turned. The mirrors were filled with copies of him. Some smiling, some screaming, some with no mouths at all. And all of them were watching. Then, footsteps. Slow, wet, not echoing like footsteps should. From the pit in the center of the room, something began to emerge. A figure, tall and featureless, its body made of pulsing shadow and stretched skin. Its chest opened like a window, revealing 100 tiny faces screaming within. Thomas backed away. He had one chance, the only thing he had left, the box. He lifted it and threw it into the pit. The entity screamed. No, 1,000 voices screamed in unison. The mirrors shattered one by one, exploding in waves of shrieking glass and light. The building trembled, the ceiling cracked, the floor split open, and the last thing Thomas saw before everything went black was his own face crawling from the pit. He woke up in his car, parked outside his house. It was dawn, the sky was pale gray, and the world was still. The box was gone, the mirrors, all gone. His house, when he entered, looked just as he left it before all this. No shattered glass, no mirror on the wall, no blood, no whispering. Had it all been a nightmare? He laughed, a broken, tired laugh. Then he walked into the bathroom, and there it was, the mirror, still, waiting. But his reflection didn't follow. It just smiled. Thomas stared at the mirror. His reflection stared back, but it wasn't him. It wore his face like a costume, but something in its eyes was wrong. Too calm, too hollow, too aware. He waved. The reflection didn't. Instead, it slowly lifted one hand and touched the inside of the glass, as though testing the thin wall between them. Thomas took a step back. That's when he noticed something else, something far worse. There was no reflection behind him, no wall, no sink, no light, just blackness. The mirror didn't show his bathroom anymore. It showed another world. Panic surged in Thomas's chest. As the lights in his house flickered, he stumbled backward, slamming the door shut. But the light bulb overhead burst in a shower of sparks. From every corner of the house he began to hear them. Whispers. Not in English, not in any language he knew. They were dry, rasping voices, as if spoken by throats that hadn't drawn breath in centuries. He ran to the front door, locked. The key turned, but the door wouldn't open. He slammed his fists against the wood. "Let me out," he shouted. "Let me out." But the house was no longer his. Down the hall, the mirror began to hum, a low, pulsing frequency, like a tuning fork resonating inside his skull. Then, from the mirror, something stepped through. Not the reflection. Something behind it. It looked like a man, but wrong. Its limbs too long, its movements too fluid, like it was pouring itself through the glass. It had no face, only a mask of stretched skin, with a smile carved into it. Behind it, dozens more shapes waited in the shadows, pressing their hands to the glass. They had been watching, and now the door was open. Thomas ran upstairs, through the guest room, into the attic. He slammed the door shut behind him and braced it with an old dresser. Dust choked the air. He stumbled into the far corner, clutching a rusted pipe as a weapon. Silence, then knocking, not at the door. From inside the walls, tap, tap, tap. The drywall bulged, cracked, and suddenly hands began to tear through, gray, withered hands dragging nails through the plaster, reaching toward him like spiders. Thomas screamed. He swung the pipe wildly, smashing fingers, tearing through bone and dust. They kept coming. But then he saw it. something in the far corner of the attic. A mirror, old, covered in dust, cracked, but still whole. Thomas crawled toward it, his mind screaming at him to stop. But something else called him. He wiped the glass. Inside he saw not himself, but Claire. She stood in a field, dressed in white, sunlight in her hair, her hands reaching out, not in terror but in sorrow. "Thomas," she whispered, "you let them in." He choked. "I didn't know, I didn't mean." She shook her head. "You opened the box. You saw them. That's all it takes." Tears burned in his eyes. "How do I stop it?" She looked down. "You can't. But you can choose." "Choose what?" "To join them, or lock the door behind you forever." Suddenly, pain exploded in his back. A hand had grabbed his leg. He twisted, kicked, but more were coming now, pouring from the floorboards, crawling through cracks, whispering his name with voices made of dust. Thomas's. He turned back to the mirror. Claire was fading. "No," he screamed. "Wait." And then he saw something behind her. The box, still closed, still sealed. That's when it hit him. He was never supposed to open it. The photos, the whispers, the descent, it had all been bait. A trap. Every time he opened it, he fed them. Each photo, each memory, a piece of himself given away. But maybe there was a way to reverse it. He smashed the mirror. Glass exploded in every direction. He grabbed a shard, cutting deep into his palm, ignoring the pain, and began carving a circle into the attic floor. He remembered the symbols from the asylum, the ones around the bed. He drew them in blood. Hands clawed at him. Voices screamed. The attic roared with the sound of something ancient and furious. Then, he placed the mirror shard in the center of the circle and spoke. "I reject you. I take myself back." The house screamed. Downstairs, every mirror in the house shattered at once. The mirror in the hallway cracked open, releasing a rush of black smoke that howled like a dying storm. The creature, the one in his shape, staggered back, its skin bubbling, melting, peeling away like wax. Faces poured from it, dozens of them, crying, laughing, begging. Thomas felt something pulling at him, pulling hard. He held on. "I'm not yours," he growled. "Not anymore." And, with a final roar, everything went dark. When he awoke, he was outside, on the grass. The sun was rising, his house behind him, burning. Windows shattered, roof caved in, smoke billowing into the sky. He didn't move, didn't cry. He just sat there, watching, because in his lap, the wooden box rested once again. But this time, it was sealed. No photos, no hum, just a faint engraving on its surface, one that hadn't been there before. To know is to invite. He stood up, weak and bleeding, but alive. He walked to the nearest road. He didn't look back. Epilogue. The box now sits in a museum storage vault, cataloged, forgotten. But every so often, when the lights are low and the security cameras flicker, it opens, and inside is a photo. A man in an attic, surrounded by mirrors, screaming.